as promised, a little bit of different thinking and how we're going to return back to the main topic at hand, which is how we progress with greater solar and greater storage. And the next topic that we're going to take a look at is data. We've talked a lot about financing, we've talked a lot about the overall points of integration, but data is going to be a crucial component of how we progress to better integration, whether it's at the customer level or whether it's at the utility level or whether it's at the development level, for how we put more solar and more storage in people's homes and businesses and on the grid. And so I am joined by a just wonderful panel, and I'd love everybody to come up on stage. Navneet Trivedi is the co-founder and COO of Verinda. Navneet, come on up. Tom Rose is the principal senior consultant at CMG. Have a seat anywhere. Mm-hmm. And Kurt Stogel is the manager for green building and sustainability for Austin Energy. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me.
Good, Chris.
Well, before we dive right into some of the questions, I thought it'd be a great, just sort of an opportunity, take about 30 seconds to a minute, give a little brief introduction beyond the name and title that I just gave. So Tom, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, Tom Rose with CMG Consulting. Spent about 35 years with TXU Corp up out of Dallas, which is the old Encore, Lumina, Vistra Energy consortium now that's been split up. And I spent from 95 to about 2009 working on restructuring the electric markets in Texas and ERCOT, and was in charge of governmental policy and strategy during that period of implementation of SB7. So I have a lot vested in the industry. And I kind of came back after a little hiatus between 2009 and 2017 and saw the market evolving, where we were finally getting to the ultimate goal we had when we began, which was a lot of buyers and lots of sellers. And that's what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing that evolving through the distributed energy. So I've spent 40 years on more efficient wholesale markets, okay? I'm gonna spend the next 40 years, because I'm 105, go the next 40 years on distributed energy and distributed resources.
We'll see you at Solar Storage Fest 2059.
There you go. I'm good.
Kurt Stogdill. I'm a newcomer to the utility industry. I've only been in it about 17 years. My group is split into two main working groups. I've got a green building group, and from a DER perspective, I'm really looking at what we can do to make buildings more grid friendly, and then on the flip side, think of what we can do to better integrate buildings into the grid. And then I've got an electric vehicles and emerging technologies group. From a DER perspective, my actual hands-on application experience goes back a pretty good ways. I looked back, and my first DER integration pilot was a V2 Green pilot that we did in 2007, where we did charge management on two converted plug-in Priuses. So that began my foray into DE integration. And now, as Carl talked about, doing a lot of work in Shines. I'm the sponsor, the initiative sponsor for that as a strategic initiative for Austin Energy. And I'm doing a lot of work with our distribution folks on what we can do from a DER management perspective.
Thank you very much. My name is Navneet Trivedi, and in my case, you have to get beyond my name to get the introduction. And it's a very interesting thing, because if this conference was happening in Westin, I would have said this is my second year sleeping in Westin. I have been here a lot, like working with CPS Energy, and I spent actually 2 years maybe sleeping in Westin, working with CPS Energy. So I am from a company named Verinda. I'm based in New York. And for the last 5 years, we are focused on, creating new business models and implementing those business models with clean energy transformation. But outside of that, I have 27 years in energy utility industry. US is my 8th country of work. I started in India, And it's very confusing because I just came back from Brazil, and in Brazil they say that if you don't speak, then you are Brazilian. So we work mostly in Northeast, like in New York. My biggest client is New York Power Authority. That's I'm working with, but we work in Northeast with Vermont. And all work is on creating the new energy platforms. And then also we are working with some of the very large utilities in Brazil. I just came from. We are trying to help develop the distributed energy resource management platform there for utility. So yeah, I've been in industry for long, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. As we dive into the conversation, a little bit about why Z-Prime thought this was a really important panel to put together. And the idea is that there's been a broad recognition over the last 10 to 15 years that data is sort of the essential backbone of grid modernization and how utilities will operate for the next 10, 15, 20 years. That information that they're collecting in a variety of different ways, whether it's on the customer side or on the operations side, is so crucial. The truth is that we're in a little bit of, even though data has been, big data has been pervasive now for the past decade, we're still in a little bit of green fields when it comes to the data around even utility scale solar and distributed energy resource solar. There's just not as long a track record and as long a runway as things like SCADA and AMI or AMR or customer data. So as one of the things that we're looking forward to seeing and what we're going to discuss here over the next 35, 40 minutes is the role that data is going to be playing over the next few years and see some of those initial use cases. So let's jump right in. How are utilities and technology providers using data currently to facilitate the management of renewable energy and DERs?
Want me to jump in?
Tom,
Sure.
please.
It's being used in a variety of ways. Probably the most prevalent is those companies that have put in automated metering systems. There's at least recognition at the premise that there's something going on. You don't necessarily know what's going on behind the meter all the time, but you have aggregators that can get that data from customers and put that together and go. I would say the thing that we're in this transition on is the utility data being essential to the market participants and the competitive providers, and how do they integrate those together as we go forward. And they're used in outage management, billing, it's a multitude of ways they use the data. But and right now I'm seeing a lot of improvement in distribution operating centers or docks being able to use that information, and a lot of you folks in the room have helped them kind of put that in chart form and pictorial form so they can understand all that data coming in, because it's millions, it's billions of bits of data.
Well, it is billions of bits of data. Mm-hmm. And Kurt, from that 30,000-foot view at Austin Energy, when it comes to data, what are you looking for as, whether it's DER level or at the utility scale, solar, when it comes to capturing data to better understand energy flows?
Well, I think in general we've got three main buckets that we'll put our data into. We've got customer data, and that is primarily historic and real-time. We've got utility system data, again, largely historic and real-time, and then we've got market data, and that can be historic, real-time, and a little more sophistication there, and we're using more forecasting related to that. And as Tom said, the devil is in trying to integrate the three of those, and right now we're running three disparate databases and control systems and trying to optimize them manually, and it ends up with a far suboptimal result than where we could be.
Navneet, what are you seeing with NIPA?
I will take a different take, and I think I can say this now. I've been in industry for quite some time. I don't think utilities really use the data. And the reason for that is they are trying to, because I have been in operation for long, and every year we used to flush the hard drive. because they don't know what to do with the data. Data was coming. If you see the real-time operation of the grid, utilities are getting seconds of data, milliseconds of data for long in operation centers. And they used to flush the hard drive because they don't know what to do with the data. So what I'm seeing right now is utilities are trying to see, as far as when it comes to DERs or distributed energy, is what is the value. And when they are looking for the value, they are trying to see that where we can find the value, and when they start kind of unpacking that, they start looking at some of the data, and they think that they don't have the data. So yes, in the operation side, we were collecting a lot of status of switches, we were getting some meter readings, but really what we use the data for and analytics out of it, that is the hard part for the utilities. And the reason for that, because most of the business was regulated and it was kind of not required for them to have that beyond an operational kind of decision making. But when it comes to DERs, what we are seeing is that utilities are searching for that value. They are asking right questions. When they ask this question that is solar or storage is valuable, then the question comes up is that what you are looking for, what is the value? And when we try to calculate the value, then you need the data. And then they are realizing that they need data and they don't have the data. So they are now kind of trying to get there. But my view on the data is that we will never be able to get the perfect data. It is improving, it has to be granular, it is getting there. But we need to kind of use some of our knowledge of the industry. Just Tom said he is 35 years and a lot of people. That knowledge coupled with whatever we have to make the decision is what the real data kind of in my mind is like, but I don't think utilities are using what they got so far to the kind of large extent.
Well, let's dig in on that, because I think that it probably in 2019 we're not flushing the data exactly from the utility perspective. Is that just a function of we have too much data in the industry, whether it's customer data, operational data, or the data at the meter, when we're getting things in that millisecond to 15-minute increments? Do we have too much data in the industry to truly wrap our arms around? Tom?
Yeah, I'll jump in. In some cases, yes, we do have too much data, but you never can have too much data. And so at CMG, what we do is help folks, utilities and others, come together to try to figure out what to do with all that information. Because that information is essential to integrating. Well, and when I started in power plants in 1975, we had analog telephones.
Right.
That's how we dispatched. Okay. Fortunately, most of you guys don't remember those days of slide rules and analog telephones, but that's what we had. Okay. And so we spent my career digitizing the control from the power plants through SCADA systems to the substations. But we still haven't taken that leap from the substation to the customer. And that's the piece that it's partially digitized. We have a lot of the data, but it's not being fully integrated and it's not being shared. And so I think it's the sharing and integration of that data that's going to make the next leap forward in the distribution side and really help consumers.
Well, that distribution side is going to be so crucial, as well as we get two-way flows of power with more solar and storage. Kurt, talk to me a little bit more about this. Dig in on that point that Navneet had just made. Austin Energy is really forward-looking when it comes to data, and how are you using that from EV programs to DER to green building?
Well, as I spoke to before, we're really making decisions based on very simplistic analysis of data. And we don't have integrated data streams that we're able to act on together, where we're able to optimize our decisions and the results from them. And that's really where we're looking to go now, is to begin to get the foundational elements in place to allow us to make integrated resource decisions. That's a very long-term approach. But I think from our perspective, given the potential value of storage within Austin Energy service territory, we're focusing on integration of resources rather than deployment of hard storage assets right now.
That's a great point. And so I'm going to bring it back to you, Navneet. if utilities aren't taking full advantage of their data, what are some of the data points around solar and storage that they could be focusing on, and project that out 2-3 years down the road? What will they be focusing on?
Yeah, I think the point is that utilities are realizing and asking the right question, that what is the value of solar and storage, right? And this is a big debate. And they are looking for designing like new tariffs, right? They are all kind of saying that we have to have right tariff, we need to have right compensation. So they need information. Like for example, in New York, when we are working with NYPA to create this program called EDGE, and my friend Doug is not here, he could have talked more. The idea is that can we do solar and storage without paying subsidies? Like, a lot of people are looking for. So when you have to make that decision that where should we do solar storage, and we don't want to pay subsidies, we want to get these data like from the wholesale market level, like we need right forecast of pricing. We want to make decision based on that. We are looking at customer side, so we are saying that, okay, what is the value for customer, not only bill saving, but what if customer can participate in the market. So there's a whole range of this value stack you must have heard of, and RMI put out that whole kind of value circle. But then how to calculate those values? Because utilities are not saying earlier, like 2-3 years ago, utility were dismissing, like maybe 5 years ago. Jigar is not here in the room, my friend, but he had a hard time getting solar in the market. But utilities are now saying that, okay, we are fine with solar and storage, but where's the value? And value is not universal. And when they start getting down to value, like in New York, we have this VDER, value of DER. That requires granular data for you to send a price signal. Like in the Times Square in Manhattan, this is the value at 4 p.m. versus in the Upper East Side at 8 p.m. So to get to that granularity and to kind of get right value, because utilities are one end facing problem with the distributed energy coming in the system, and they've been forced by regulators to kind of absorb that, but they have infrastructure already built, and they don't want to compensate. So when you get into these questions, like what is the right value, what is the right compensation, then you need to talk about the data. And what I'm seeing is that utilities have started realizing that they need the data. That's why I think you're talking about integrating operation data with the customer data and all those things, because you are really trying to answer that question.
Come right back to you. Couple things. First, as you talked about, projects that are trying to get off the ground without rebates. Now, is that also inclusive of projects trying to get off the ground without an investment tax credit, or just on the rebate side, or is that both?
So there are the business model question comes in there basically, like as a utility, as like somebody who's trying to facilitate the customer, they don't care about like if the developer is getting investment tax credit on that thing. But utilities is more kind of interested in knowing the right value which they can pay for that investment. So it's basically all inclusive, but it's just that trade-off. Like, for example, in a project which we are doing in New York, NYPA wants to own, like to buy the output, like PPA. So they will take the output of the project, and then they are allowing, but then if you don't own the asset, you cannot get ITC, your tax equity. So they are trying to work on those structures. But then that's where we are trying to create these models and work through that model to see that what will be that optimal kind of thing. And when we come to that optimization, that's where the data becomes very critical. But what I'm kind of saying is that my utility friends are started kind of asking right questions, but they have to go through that. And when we start digging into that, I don't think we are there, like for next 3, 4, 5 years, we are not going to have the data, but we still going to make the decisions. So it's a combination of experience and whatever we got. Like we are using hourly data. Like you all know, if in this room, if I have hourly data and I try to optimize the storage, it's not going to give me the right results. I need more granular data. But if I wait for granular data, like I need to wait for next 3 years to have smart meters come in their place. So a lot of things are going on in the kind of thing how we are trying to do, but I think utilities have started realizing the value of the data through this process. And it's not that they don't realize when the responsibility was to keep the lights on in the operation. They were looking at all the switch positions in real time. They were collecting because that was the most important. Now, how to deal with customer, how to kind of control this growth of DERs. Because in Brazil, for example, they asked me, one of these utilities getting like, since I started a project, they got 10% of their load from solar in 2 years. And they are projected to go up to 50%. And their reliability is low. So they are worried about what will happen to their system. And when this pressure came, they started looking all over, saying that what is the value of this solar and how to kind of integrate this thing, what I need to do to control. So what I'm saying is that utilities are feeling that pressure some way or other. Either they have reliability challenge or they have economic challenge.
I've got a real world example over the last 20 years. When we opened the markets up here in Texas in '99 and opened them up in 2002, we thought that metering was a competitive service, be provided by competitive. We figured out by 2005 that wasn't going to happen, and so we got legislation, and SB 7 was amended to allow utilities, require them to put in automated metering, investor-owned utilities. When that first started going in 2008, 2009, 2010, you talk about flood of data. Okay, you're going from 1 meter read a month for residential and small commercial to 96 a day.
Yes.
Okay, that you're pinging that meter. That data was overwhelming. But over a period of about 5 years, they were able to say, let's take that data and let's integrate it in and let's understand what the data is. And now it's advanced where I not only use it for outage management and voltage detection and problems before they happen, I also use it for planning. So it's a huge benefit for planning. Now on the downside, I've got a PV, 10 kW PV on my house in Dallas. Okay, and I've got a perfectly good dashboard that Solar City built for me, and I tap it, I know instantaneously where everything is. Okay, no integration of that with automated metering. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so the control operators, whether it's at the distribution level or whether it's at ERCOT's level, don't have any visibility into that system, and that's where I'm saying we've got to integrate that data.
Right.
It's just a perfect example of need to integrate.
I think the data is becoming cheaper, so we are going to get more and more data. Like, we were talking over the lunch, Jigar and I, like, about this Zigbee protocol. Like, for long there was a problem with thermostats that utilities wanted only on Zigbee. And it was so difficult because that it was almost proprietary with the AMI. You have to have, otherwise you cannot communicate, utilities cannot communicate. Now, for $180, you are getting a Wi-Fi enabled kind of device which can control the home and give you all the data. So I think data is available.
Right.
But I think my take is that utilities are asking right question, but they need to go deeper into understanding the value what the data can bring. I think that's the culture change in the utility need to happen.
So what value, and I do want to get back to additional types of data that we'll be looking at, but what value, Kurt, is the data going to bring when it comes to knowing your customers and knowing the distributed energy resource penetration in particular areas of Austin Energy's grid and operational sector?
Well, I think you can look at it from two perspectives, and one is that we're still in a reaction mode, and we're using data now to be reactive to what's going on. Moving forward, we'd like to be proactive.
Sure.
So as we can figure out where we need these resources to be from a locational standpoint and a system standpoint, where our customers need those resources to be, where the market needs those resources to be, we can reconcile the three of those and begin to incentivize customers to put the types of resources that we need, where we need, and to get them to behave in a manner that is beneficial to all those different use cases.
Yeah, I just want to kind of come on that, like in terms of why, like how utilities can use or they are kind of realizing the value in this thing. So we are right now working on a project along with NYPA to one of their customers want to expand their supply. Like, so for a utility, nothing can be better than your customer asking 2 megawatt, additional power. But the utility which is serving them, they said they cannot give you. You have to pay $10 million for extension of line. And they brought us in to see, can there be another solution without grid, right? Now the problem is that without data, in New York, as you know, it has declared 100% renewable, right, by 2040. So decarbonization is the state goal. And NIPA cannot go and tell anybody that this particular problem cannot be solved as of now with the technologies available, which are total carbon free. Carbon has to be part of it, but nobody can say that because it's a state kind of objective. So when we put the data and we showed them the analysis, we said this is almost a flat load curve, continuous process plant. You are not going to work with solar and storage alone to kind of meet the requirement, what they need for 24/7. And when we did this analysis and showed with the data, like people are now able to say, okay, let's not have carbon free, let's talk carbon neutral, right? So that, if you're a utility and you have been kind of pushed by a regulator to do certain things, we all know, we are all engineers, that certain things cannot be solved, like storage and solar technologies are becoming mature, they are reducing in cost, but there are certain places they will not work, right? Same thing with Con Ed, I keep talking to them because like REV, we are pushing them to do non-wires alternative, we are saying that you have to absorb this thing, but they said there is no value. But I said, by saying that there is no value, nobody is going to believe it. You have to put it on a number and show them that it doesn't work. And when it comes to number, utilities are always like, oh, I don't have all the kind of thing and how to kind of use, because we are engineers. We are like, tuned not to kind of do that kind of economic analysis. And that's one thing I think you will agree that the shift in the organization in utility, I think we need more young data scientists who can kind of crunch the data and not afraid of data.
That's certainly a very topical issue in the overall energy industry, how we attract young talent. I want to slightly shift the conversation back to follow up on a point, Kurt, that you just made, and that is that as you're projecting out, to me, let's walk the audience through this, because to me this seems a twofold issue. As you're trying to do better planning at Austin Energy, and the same can be applied for CPS or countless other utilities around Texas and around the country. It seems to me that you're taking customer data about a variety of different customer data, not just their AMI, but also which looks at their usage, but maybe social media data, billing data, to see what they might, programmatic things that they might be interested in. But then you have to combine that with the operational data of where power flows are needed at any given moment on the grid. So talk to me about what you might want, as you're projecting out 2, 3, 5 years down the road, what is Austin Energy really looking at when it comes to that point of integration of the data to help incentivize the right type of DER in the right place for the right person or business?
I think ultimately what you're looking at is a system of systems or a platform of platforms, so that you've got a number of interactive ecospheres that allow interaction of resources with potential market value. How that's defined, I think, is to be determined. But we're trying to understand from a utility perspective how to proactively model on our system where we would need these resources to be, and allow that. And I think the devil is that right now we're not there. If you look at a utility, something utilities really know, unfortunately, is silos. And we've got to overcome those silos. We've got billing systems that are disparate from our ADMS system. You've got other customer functions that are separate as well. All our DR platforms are standalone platforms. How do you begin to get all these things to talk together? The other challenge you get is that no two utilities are the same. So nobody can come to you with a turnkey solution which meets your needs. Everything's custom. And that becomes a huge challenge. So how do you develop these resources concurrently along with the value to support them, so that they're viable, as opposed to having a resource there that doesn't yet have the value or that you're not able to manifest that value from?
Well, it's such a great point. And it kind of brings back to that AMI discussion that every utility is certainly unique for a variety of different reasons. Perhaps most significantly with this point of customer data and the understanding of what's going on in the grid is AMI. Just last year, we, as in the United States, we exceeded 50% AMI penetration in the country. So there's still a significant way to go. New York is a little bit behind the curve on that,
Yes.
but rolling things out very quickly. So what works for for Con Ed or NYPA is going to be different than Austin Energy or Encore. But I think Tom wants to get in on this as well here. And you want to talk, perhaps you can share a little bit about your perspective about some of the points of data that utilities could be and should be capturing.
Sure, I think the way we look at it as CMG with Andreas and I and Bill and all the group of us is we see a convergence of computing and communication technology with electrification, with transportation. And so when you look on those in that light, utilities have to start thinking about data, and quite frankly, all the competitive suppliers working with those utilities and customers have to think about data more in light like the communication and computing technology into the business, and start merging those together and figuring out those apps and solutions that will work. There are impediments to get there. Probably the biggest is cultural, but to try to get everybody to work together, because between cultural and cyber, I'm running in, that's like brick walls, okay? And what I'm trying to do at CMG is to get these groups together there is a solution there. It may not be A or B, but it'll be C. And it's a matter of integrating that data between those industries so that you can charge your car and you know what you're paying for when you charge it, and the system understands it, the utility gets it, and they know that they've got an extra load on that system. And so it's got to become almost robotic at that point. We're a long ways from being robotic, but 5-10 years down the road, I think that's where it's going to hit.
I think both Navneet and Tom, you've danced around it a little bit, but to me that sounds a lot like time of use pricing, and what can regulators do to help incentivize the usage of electricity, particularly when we have more electric vehicle penetration on the grid, and how can then utilities, knowing that we have time of use pricing that will send an incentive to the customer, do a better job of load management and integrating renewable resources.
And I'm going to push back a little because
please do.
I think that's old school utility. I mean, I was putting in thermal storage in the 70s and 80s, all kinds of technologies that are out there. There are thousands of them that are just waiting to jump into the fray. And I think you've got to look into the future when you say, where's the future going in the utility business? You've got to look at here again, it's about competition. It's what does the consumer want? Okay, it's not about what the utility wants. It's not about anybody else. It's about what last time I checked, you don't have a viable business if you don't have a customer.
Right.
Okay, you got to have those checks coming in. And we're used to in the industry being regulated where we think of them as ratepayers. And I'll give kudos to Paula Gold Williams and all the folks at CPS and at Austin Energy too, because they look them as customers. They're not ratepayers. Okay, and I think that's the cultural shift that has to take place.
I think looking in the future, one of the things is utilities know, but they are fearful. They think that if the hood is opened, what will happen? For example, you ask what they need. We talk about planning. You need to know where, so one end utilities are saying that, oh, there are so many solar coming in, it's creating problem. And when you ask them, where is the problem? Can you pinpoint which part? What I'm referring to is hosting capacity analysis and put out the map. But the utilities are fearful that if they put out the map, they may say that, okay, this place has no problem, so they have overbuilt the capacity. I'm just saying that, you need to kind of allow the data to be out for people to do innovation, because utilities are fundamentally missing the point, as you said, Tom. They need to hold the customer. It's not about selling electricity. That product is there actually. If somebody is needed, they will take it. That you already championed it. You need to move beyond that. And when you want to move beyond that, if you want to be a platform provider, you need to be able to say that this part of the network has problem. We invite people to come here, and this is the value we are willing to pay.
Kurt, did you want to jump in here?
Sure, I think it's also a fundamental opportunity for utilities. It shouldn't be just looked upon as a negative. It really is an opportunity for us to re-engage with our customers and provide a higher level of service.
Right, absolutely.
Well, let's take a look at some potential data use cases for distributed energy resources. And Tom kicked this off kind of at the beginning when he talked about an outage management scenario. And now as more and more utilities have automated and digitized and digitalized their outage management system, can you foresee what's the timeline between connecting that outage management system with distributed energy resources that are on the grid so that we can have greater reliability, greater resiliency in times of either minor or extended outages?
Sure, and we're a pretty good ways from there. It's hard to put a year on there, but it's probably years, not months,
Okay.
On how we get to that point. And my point is we're going to have to work together to get to that point, because it's not going to just happen by the government saying it's going to happen. Okay, it's got to happen because the consumer is going to benefit or get hurt from not having that data, and the folks that are trying to serve them not having that data. That's what's going to force the hand, and that's what's going to make it go forward. It's just a big challenge again, it's just integration. I think the data, a lot of data is out there about customer use. Certainly through cell phones and through smartphones, the big companies have a lot of data. Now, I will tell you, there's a very legitimate privacy concern about customers not wanting to, it's part of the cultural issue, not wanting to give their data to everybody in this room so they could go figure out a better solution for them. You have to go to the customer individually and say, will you let me get your data? That's a pretty tough market to deal with.
You talked about use cases, and through our Shines project, we're looking at balancing use cases and value propositions. So we developed 6 different use cases, including 4CP, demand reduction for customers, energy arbitrage. There was a handful of others, but we were also looking at it from the perspectives of a utility perspective, a third-party aggregation perspective, and a customer perspective. And how do you balance all those and understand the differences in the interrelationships? Because there's going to be a trade-off between all of those, and figuring out how to manifest the most value out of that is really how you make this work. So you understand the interrelationships of this, and then you begin to understand how you want to send signals to have those resources react in that way. You really begin to make some progress.
That's great. I've got another question that I would like to pose to the panel, but before I do that, I want to open this up and make this interactive. Do we have any questions out there in the audience right now?
Thank you. This is a fascinating topic for me. I'd appreciate your comments on whether or not you're seeing any utilities starting to adopt artificial intelligence and any learning algorithms to be able to take advantage of this data more efficiently than humans are able to. It's being done in other industries, and I see very little, if any, being done in the utility industry globally.
We have an answer at Z-Prime on that. We've done some research on this, but go ahead, Navneet, if you want to.
So you're right, like utilities are behind in that sense to use these kind of things. But what we have seen is like they are using some of the things like with blockchain and all. There are use cases like they are trying with that. New York, for example, they are trying to create the digital twin of the grid in NYPA for kind of, better manage but they are not gone on the optimization of the network. They are more like looking at asset optimization using this kind of thing. So there are examples, but I have not seen like a widespread use of AI as of now, which is very much required with the aging workforce.
I agree. I don't see any in the operational side of the business versus autonomous vehicles and drones and boats and planes. And clearly the robotics industry is embracing AI and going that route. And I'm not seeing the utility there because especially the distribution side from that substation to the customer. But what's going to drive it is I've got more inconsistent generation. I've got more inconsistent loads and distributed generation. And I'm going to have to build adaptive microgrids, for instance, to handle that process. And by the way, that's not a huge stretch because a distribution system is a microgrid.
Yes.
I mean, we have it metered on both sides and relayed on both sides, and if something happens to that piece, you take it out so that you can repair it, and the rest of the system doesn't come down with you.
Right.
What we're going to see is in the future, 10 years from now, is starting to see AI being used, in my opinion, as an adaptive microgrid with human supervision that's looking at that distribution system and is protecting it against the rest of the grid at the same time it's keeping that grid going. So
Yeah.
I see it coming, but I know of no operational system that's using AI at this point.
I think one thing which I just add to this, I'm very optimistic because for last 5 years, I'm seeing a lot of young people coming and joining utility industry. And there's the hope. They will push the envelope on these things, so I think this will happen.
Kurt, did you have anything to add on that? Have you solved AI with Shines here? Are you
No,
putting out on us?
we have not gotten there with AI, so.
Okay. No, and just really quickly from a Z-Prime research perspective, we did a report at the beginning part of the year looking at IoT data, IIoT data, and then the advancement of machine learning and AI from an integration perspective. And what we found, and forgive me, I don't have the report right in front of me, but something like 55-60% of utilities are deeply invested in IIoT and IoT data, and a fractional amount of that have made significant progress when it comes to true AI. And true AI, I think, people can disagree. This is a little bit of a personal opinion. We're still a ways off from full true AI. We're at machine learning. We're at advanced algorithms. But the broad stroke of this was that the utility industry is trying to get as much data capture capability in place before they can take advantage of it through machine learning, advanced algorithms, and AI. So thank you for that great question. I think we've got another question right here in the middle.
Yeah, actually, Navneet kind of touched on what I was going to ask about. You guys touched on a lot of the problems about data, which is, part of it being the silos of the data. One thing I didn't hear you touch on really is the data quality. Even though these siloed systems by themselves may be pristine for what they're used today or not used today, when you bring them together, our experience for the company that I work for is that when you start bringing them together, in many cases you find issues that didn't exist in their siloed state, right? So in trying to build a digital twin, that is one of the biggest problems that I think some of our users are running into. And I guess I'd like to know whether, do you see the digital twin really becoming the solution for many of these problems? In other words, the need for load forecasting, using machine learning for load forecasting and solving other problems, grid optimization, hosting capacity analysis being another. If you consider that when you calculate a hosting capacity map for a circuit, as soon as you add a DER, whether it's truly you build it or you propose it, you've actually changed the hosting capacity of that circuit immediately.
Yeah.
Right.
And the only way to compensate for that is with the digital twin.
That's a great question, and it sort of ties in with my last question. So we don't have a ton of time, but using the digital twin, how can we use data to overcome the challenges associated with distributed energy resources and utility scale renewable integration? So,
And my opinion, quick answer is someone's got to step forward and build the data platform. I mean, utility has the wires platform. Utility may be the best one to build a standardized open architecture
a virtual
data
power
farm.
plant or beyond that?
Beyond that, where all interactions are taking place between the consumer and their service providers using that data. Now, the tricky part is keeping that data from being encrypted, or not encrypted, but corrupted with cyber. And so so I think there's an opportunity for utilities to become not only the wires platform, but even the data platform, much like we did with automated metering. And because we need a consistent platform. Now, AT&T could do it. There are many other folks that could come in and do it, but are they going to?
Right. Kurt?
Yeah, I agree. It's coming up with an infrastructure that allows for the open exchange of energy information and value, and in a way that is using refreshed and forward-looking data as opposed to static or stale data. And how do we get all that to interact?
Navneet, last word to you here.
Right. I think the data quality, definitely, you know that it is bad because you're using it, right? The first thing there. And second thing is, as far as utilities, I think they need to separate themselves from being the owner of data and enabler for the market. For most part, utilities, the only data like right now available is mostly with utilities, but they don't want to part with it. In New York, we have a mandate for utilities to create like a data platform and share the information, and it's like almost 3-4 years now, they have not done it because they are not able to separate themselves from owners of data and the facilitating the market. Like New York Rev wanted them to animate the market, they didn't do it. So I think the quality will improve, the usage will improve, but I think the utilities need to kind of little bit step aside, like they need to give up, like in a sense that they can get better answers from market if they let the data be used by people. So yes.
I think that's a great place to end this conversation on. We as Tom said, he's already committed to 2059 Solar Storage Fest and the data challenges of that. Thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate your great comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.